And we like to say that we're sort of too punk for TradFi, but too boring for crypto. And I think there's like a niche of like one that we fit and we fill for organizations that want to understand sort of how to use these technologies to give their products a lasting competitive advantage. Mm-hmm. Our mission, the reason that we're doing this at all is because we strongly believe that finance should be open and transparent. We also believe that there's no better way to do it than on a settlement layer that's decentralized and permissionless, like, for example, Ethereum.
Hello and welcome to the Protocol Services Podcast, where we chat with the specialist teams from consultants, risk advisory, treasury management, strategic finance, and everything in between to uncover more about these critical businesses helping build the decentralized organizations shaping the future of Web3. I have my guest here, Adrian from Steakhouse. Welcome.
Hi, nice to see you again. How are you?
Yeah, doing well. Excited for the conversation. I guess for our listeners to kick things off, maybe give just a little bit of your story into crypto, and I guess that'll segue into kind of Steakhouse's founding.
I became interested, so I actually heard about I had looked into crypto from an early stage at university in engineering studies in an engineering context. I also remember thinking, with all of the sort of establishment propaganda that was going around at the time about Bitcoin, about how it's like, oh, it's unbacked, it's a Ponzi, it's this, that, the other. I kind of accepted that and never really looked deeper into it. And it wasn't really until after, to the extent that by 2018, I sort of had the theory or the thesis that, okay, if this thing is really not worth anything, then it should eventually go to zero as people sort of drift out of it, just like with it, like whatever, Beanie Babies or something. For me, the turning point was actually after the 2018 crash, seeing that Bitcoin did not go to zero and that I had to sort of reevaluate my priors. That sort of led me back into the exploration of Bitcoin, this, that, the other, and really understanding the fundamental value behind, building a decentralized ledger that people could use without permission from any third party to just transact between each other. I thought that was a really powerful idea. Mm-hmm. Steakhouse really started when we met as contributors to MakerDAO. So I like to say that we met on the internet. We met in the Discord and in the forums. At the time, I think, Sebastien, one of my co-founders, he had already been contributing for some time, and he had actually started the first real assets core unit at Maker when the foundation dissolved in 2021, if I remember correctly. And that's when the DAO really got started. And then Mark joined Seb, and then I joined them both later on as sort of contributors. Mm-hmm. And, at this time, sort of our first contributions were sort of to provide, strategic financial analysis to the community. And from there, we took some of Seb's earlier frameworks that he had developed around asset liability management. He has an encyclopedic knowledge about banking history and how the financial system works, and he had been exploring in some early forum posts how you could apply this to a stablecoin. We helped sort of evolve that thinking and develop a new sort of ground up understanding about how to think about a stablecoin, how to run a stablecoin. We actually wrote a small paper sort of synthesizing this later with Hasu, which is available on our website. It's called Operating Manual for Decentralized Stablecoins. Mm-hmm. Later on with the endgame, with Maker's endgame, we transitioned into serving the community as ecosystem launch actors. So we supported the development of Sky, what is now Sky, and helped formalize some of the asset liability work in the context, especially in the context of these new structures called sub-DAOs, such as, Spark protocol today. And in the process, we actually ended up creating what turned out to be the first general ledger, first general accounting ledger for the Maker protocol based on dual entry accounting principles. And I think this was a turning point for us because it really turbocharged our reporting. It allowed us to make sort of more and more complex analysis and develop more granular insights. To that end, this data is open source. We built it using June. And it's now powering dashboards all over the ecosystem on places like Blockworks Research or Artemis and so forth. And what we realized is that we could be helpful to other communities as well. And we started branching out to other protocols like Lido. So these were protocols that we already knew, and we already had tokens or were participating in voting or whatever. Today, and that's kind of when we formed Steakhouse Financial Limited, the company. Mm-hmm. Today, we have a very deep bench of, super experienced chefs And I think our work gives us quite unique insights into very successful protocols. Today we work with more than DAOs. We work with organizations and companies that are sort of looking to use the cost efficiency and settlement neutrality of public blockchains to build new and innovative products. These are products like M0 or Mountain or, future names that we'll announce eventually. And I think we're able to sort of bridge this gap between traditional finance because we come from sort of TradFi ourselves. We have traditional finance backgrounds, but we are also quite crypto native. Like it's our home, like all the chefs are from different parts of the world, but really what the thread that we have in common is that we're all sort of internet native citizens. Mm-hmm. And we like to say that we're sort of too punk for TradFi, but too boring for crypto. And I think there's like a niche of like one that we fit and we fill for organizations that want to understand sort of how to use these technologies to give their products a lasting competitive advantage. Mm-hmm. Our mission, the reason that we're doing this at all is because we strongly believe that finance should be open and transparent. And we also believe that there's no better way to do it than on a settlement layer that's decentralized and permissionless, like, for example, Ethereum.
You started with this skeptics lens around crypto and then sort of built up a first principles understanding. What gave you conviction in Maker and like the idea of a decentralized stablecoin of like, this is somewhere worthwhile for kind of like your pursuits and to build a company off of?
What I really liked about Maker was the fact that it's a stablecoin that has like real users. I don't know how else to put this. And I think this is a really important point. It's a stablecoin, and the people who use DAI were using it at, even though it has like the CDP heart at the center of it, people were using and are using DAI and now USDS to transact with each other and to pay for things. I think that's a really important. That was like an important insight of like, wow, you can build this thing that kind of looks and behaves like a bank, but isn't really a bank. And there's no bank either. It's a smart contract. And mm-hmm. It was like that moment of like, this is actually kind of amazing that you can build what is essentially functionally a narrow bank without having to build like an office, without having to have like people there making mistakes. You have the smart contract, which has its rules, its preset, and everything works according to those rules. It was like a mix of sort of, wow, there's this thing that kind of looks like finance and it operates around the principles of code as law and users opt in to use it. Nobody's forcing people to use DAI and it works, right? Like this is the crazy thing. Like this is a smart contract, that was deployed by open source developers years ago and it still works and it works in exactly the same way. And I think that was a really blinding insight moment. It also sort of opened the door to rediscovering the beauty of financial history. So when I briefly worked on as an M&A investment banker, consumer good, retail, and healthcare, I had always felt that I had drawn the lucky straw and not worked in like the financial institutions group because that's where everybody went to like suffer and die. Mm-hmm. And I kind of regret not doing that now because I realized that actually banks are an amazing structure to look and study. And, maybe it's a good thing that I actually did get a chance to relearn it from scratch, almost from first principles, right? Like it's, like what is the smallest unit of a bank, right? And what is the best way to like organize it and put it together? These were all the things that kept me on the Maker forums for like hours a day. Yeah, this sort of fascination with like protocols keeps me in the business still.
I think that the monetary history component is fascinating. I mean, I remember back in like 2016, 17, when I was going down the rabbit hole, right? There wasn't a flourishing like DeFi ecosystem. There wasn't a modular debate. There wasn't, ZK proofs. Like it was really just currency. But so with that came a lot of conversation around just like monetary history and macroeconomics and, going from the rhinestones of Yap all the way to like free banking systems in the UK, right? Where there's
exactly.
Private credit institutions. And then when you come to something like Maker, you realize like, this isn't just like some crazy idea a bunch of crypto people had of like, oh, let's create this stablecoin thing. It's actually kind of the logical progression of a lot of prior experiments that have been done, but just in a digitally native way. Would you kind of agree with that line of thinking?
Definitely. My colleague said he had this fascination. One of the, like reading his tweets before I knew him, he liked to talk a lot about this period of financial history in Scotland and the free banking era, sort of close to the Act of Union in the 18th century. the early 18th century, when the Bank of England had been formed and had much more of a sort of link to the government in London, but there wasn't such an obvious link with the banking sector, between the banking sector and the government in Scotland. And what emerged was this sort of crazy ecosystem of companies that were issuing private liabilities and competing with each other on that basis. And you had situations that have very interesting parallels. The basis of all this is this book called Scottish Banking: A History, like 16, whatever the hell year it was to 18 or something, by a scholar called S.G. Checkland. He describes a period of history that has many really interesting parallels in crypto, like a period of when some of the like early Royal Bank of Scotland and so forth were emerging. The scrip that they were issuing as their liabilities could have a different price or a different value depending on where a branch was located. You know, some of the early papers that people have been publishing from the, let's say, regulatory perspective or from like the public sector perspective, in particular, the Bank for International Settlements, you know, elements within that organization like to hone in on this aspect of stablecoins of like, oh, they don't trade at $1 all the time, so therefore they're a failure. You know, you read through the history and you can see this phenomenon occurring in the economy today. Like that you're describing a secondary market price. Like when you see this, like the curtain is lifted. It's like the Bank of Scotland had liabilities circulating in Glasgow that were trading at a different price to the ones in Edinburgh. What mattered was the redemption at the bank, that the fact that you could go and get your sterling at the office for par value. But the value of the currency itself, of that private liability, could fluctuate and often trade at a premium or discount. In the same way that when you get, if you try to buy euros at an airport FX desk today, you're going to get an absolutely rubbish, DPEG, to use the cynical term. That's kind of normal in a free market. You know, understanding these things helps you also see how strongly intervened many industries, in particular the financial services industry, is. You know, there are a lot of exogenous distortions to how this market could function and may function better. And I think stablecoins give the security of like all of the things that regulators are worried about every day, that consumer protection and making sure that depositors can be made whole and so forth. Studying MakerDAO, you could see, oh, you can actually encode these things. Like you can actually write into the program the wind down procedure at Maker, the emergency shutdown. You don't need to have, you know, a government employee going once a month or once a quarter to make sure that the things are in the right places. Like you can just write it into the code and it'll work because it's made to work forever. Yeah, so all of these things were like the discovery period, and I'm still enthralled by all this, honestly.
If Maker is, you know, this private credit generating institution, right, where all of the rules are encoded and they're pretty much saying like, hey, we have a system that's more trustworthy, transparent, and we create a good, right? DAI, a stablecoin, and you can borrow and lend in this system. So then from a Steakhouse perspective, do you guys view yourselves almost like the in-house kind of corporate finance team for them in terms of like the work you do and the deliverables?
Sure. It depends on what you mean by in-house. Like we've been contributing to Sky for long enough that we certainly feel a high degree of ownership and responsibility to the things that we do. There's a certain amount of track record that's built up, that builds up a certain amount of expectation around the quality of our work. And that just keeps us animated on the day-to-day and makes us feel in-house. But at the end of the day, a DAO doesn't have a house, right? It'll always depend, like not a Dino, decentralized in name only, but like a smart contract DAO built on Aragon or built with like the Maker system. It'll always depend to some extent on external parties or service providers to come forward and contribute to the protocol. You know, we serve at the mercy of token holders for the good of the protocols that we believe in. I do think that we have a bit of a, you know, I feel lucky to feel that we have a bit of a luxury of being able to pick our mandates a bit. So the three co-founders, we're sort of very passionate about the space. We really want to make a difference. And we're not so super obsessed about like covering every single DAO or working for every crypto curious company. We try to bet on winners that we believe can help make finance open and transparent. And then we throw in our lot with them and then we chuck away the key. You know, we try to think about these things very considerately. We try to take as much of the grants that we receive as possible in the native token, where we can, so that we can align ourselves to the success of our recommendations. And when we work for like traditional companies, now that we're extending, our business, it's a little bit harder to get a token, but we'll still try. And here, I think when we're thinking about sort of in-house, many companies do have very sort of capable resources in-house, but I would say what we offer is solutions. And often crypto companies that come at crypto do so from the perspective of a newbie, or they face a very steep learning curve. And as a result, often risk either sort of designing flawed products or, spending an enormous amount of money to just end up like courting like whales that, attack the token to like extract the incentives and then leave. We have the sort of scars and the experience to sort of short circuit that learning process and help guide product development and the launch into a positive and sustainable direction, especially for stablecoins where we've sort of developed a particular niche. Like, I don't think there are that many stablecoin advisory firms. Like, maybe we're the only one. Like, I have no idea. I don't think like McKinsey could come in and spin up a stablecoin advisory practice without having done the sort of level grinding that we have. You can sort of think of us, if you want, like a boutique investment bank, if you like, but we're really focused on like advisory. This is where we think that we can deliver the most value and get the closest to accomplishing our mission.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, so more of boutique IB shop with very kind of targeted engagements with protocols versus kind of having a hyper scalable offering that you're offering to any protocol that wants it. After that initial kind of engagement with Maker, like what gave you conviction in this market for crypto native financial advisory, where I was like, all right, if this decentralized stablecoin needs it, hey, maybe a staking protocol or any of these other kind of teams you're working with, like, did you do like a TAM analysis, or like how'd you kind of like think through building out this IB shop?
No, we're very organic. We're very unstructured in this way as a partnership, I would say. Even if we wanted to reach the middle of the curve from all the way on the left where we stand today, I don't think we could hike it. It's at the root of it was a very simple observation, which was that we found that we had sort of technical literacy, but we also had financial literacy. To be clear, the developers, talented developers are perfectly capable of doing both. Like, let's be honest, like finance is not rocket science. It's very simple. And if you're a motivated engineer, you'll get it in like a week. I would say there is something to the intuition and to like the first principles thinking that sometimes falls through the cracks, and that really comes with experience. And in particular, when, developers get too enthralled with like the gadgetry of the software they're building, like mechanisms are cool and they're interesting, but at the end of the day, they're tools. And as tools, they have to be useful to users, human beings with like thoughts and motivations on the other side. Like, as an example of a blind spot, like one of the things that drew us to Lido, for example, is the way that DAOs like to count their native tokens as an asset in their balance sheets, which in our view is wrong. On the basis that, total supply of a token it's a fugazi, it's a fictitious number. It's just a way that the smart contract has been programmed. And you can argue maybe that some tokens are hard coded to have like a max supply, but fundamentally that just means that they have a limitation on how much dilution they can expense to their token holders. So it makes the question of how much to dilute all the more important. Like, to take the other side for a second, this specific point, I wanted to steelman the counter argument to this, which was the fact that this reasoning comes from drawing like a straight line analogy to equity in a company. I think that like there are many ways in which this parallel between equity and tokens is imperfect or broken. So for one, like when we work with projects, we mostly work with actually decentralized on-chain DAOs, the kind that are run by Aragon, not by a Web2 server. But at the end of the day, most DeFi protocols like this are basically just dressed up balance sheets. They're, smart contracts are essentially like accounting ledgers, no matter how you cut it. The smart contracts, they transform a liability into an asset in different ways. And, when they're trying to build like a public good type in financial infrastructure like Sky, the token's role is only there to sort of play an incentive balancing act to keep all of the users of the software aligned to using the smart contracts in a way that benefits kind of everyone. I think that this is a really, like, from the perspective of TradFi, this is a super exotic notion, and it's really hard to make a mapping. Just from a fundamental economic perspective, there is still a dilution event that takes place when a token is issued into circulation, and people misrepresent it when they count the market value of the native tokens in the treasury as an asset. This type of nuance is often lost, and I think where we found our opportunity to like fill a niche was in making that glue of trying to explain in simple terms to communities and token holders that you can't just like bomb your token into the curve or what have you, because it's going to be extremely costly and you're not really measuring the benefit behind it. These types of insights are the sort of thing that I think we built our brand and reputation on, because they've really had a positive and measurable impact on the DAOs and the protocols that we worked with. So a long way of saying no time analysis.
Yeah. And so double clicking on something you mentioned earlier about the automated accounting, right? Because this is all a smart contract based system. So anyone can see how these work and then, build out, okay, what does the balance sheet, income statement, cash flows look like? But I'm curious, like, how do you see the value of almost like traditional like corporate accounting, but ported into this world? Because like, I know you guys spend a lot of time building out like Dune dashboards, but like, is there still value in, building out a 10K for MakerDAO?
Yeah, like stepping back, like every smart contract protocol is an accounting ledger in some sense. Like it's just counting the ways that people use it and how one number is transformed into another. And it keeps track of that in the history. And you can look back and see all of the transactions that have taken place and take a snapshot of the state of a smart contract accounting ledger if you want. What's difficult, what's sort of less intuitive here is that they're all built in different ways. The VAT for Maker is different to the accounting ledger for Lido, for example, completely different. It's just coded differently. They use different terminologies. They're meant to do different things. Like it's just not the same. When we started for Maker, we publish our reports on June. So we really love this tool. We think it's one of the best ways to like distribute this information and make it accessible, let other people build on top of it. It also saves us having to build the stack ourselves. And the reason that we publish a glossy annual report, we made one, we started with 2022. We made one for 2023. We'll make one for 2024. I guess some people enjoy PDFs, for some reason. They're down, the versions that we put up online, they get downloaded by tens of thousands of people. So I guess there's some value to it. I personally don't understand it super well, but I'm just too used to like the Maker system. Financial reporting is just one aspect of it. And, we see it as a sort of hygiene factor. Like it's easy to do badly, right? But, you just have to like do it well and not make mistakes. And we had many frustrations with how, data aggregators were presenting this information. There's many good ones, obviously, like MakerBurn that I mentioned, DeFi Llama is great. Obviously Messari, if you're a Messari user. What we realized for our reports and our monthly snapshots is that Maker, although looking quite complicated from a smart contract perspective, was actually much more conceptually simple than it seemed to people who weren't well versed in smart contract programming or in being able to understand or how to parse, let's say, a history of transactions. So when we started, it was only from the premise of let's explore what's the best way that we can help the community understand how the balance sheet functions in a simplified way and in a framework that many people have some intuition for. Like balance sheets and accounting, even if you don't understand accounting fully, is still something like most people kind of get a P&L. Most people kind of get a balance sheet. And I think it makes it simpler to understand. And this is all the more important for something like Maker. I was talking earlier about like the financial institutions group at the investment bank. Contrasted with one of the reasons it was so hellish is because when you contrast it with something like a consumer goods company, the balance sheet is completely flipped. The cost of goods sold is completely different. Like it just takes some time to think about and understand it. And it's a bit counterintuitive. And so we try to simplify this into like assets, liabilities, the surplus, the equity, to make it clearer for people to understand what the impact could be of a rate change on CDP, for example, or what the impact could be of reallocating liquidity away from USDC. At the end of the day, like the canonical version is, for me anyway, always going to be the version on June. It's, the version where anyone can sort of click through and audit down to the general ledger and look at the transaction hash and follow the trail themselves. Speaking as someone who's been like dusted in like various flavors of corporate finance in the past, having helped, in the exercise of building out this general ledger for Maker, I find myself just completely unable to read 10Qs or 10Ks anymore. Like I just can't. It's just such a deficient way of reporting this information. Like to think that a bank or a company can give you a snapshot once every 3 months and that you can parse something meaningful about it, about the state of the system now. It's parochial. It's archaic. Credit Suisse, for example, published, it was like a 10, no, it was like a 12 or more. I think it could have been like a 14% tier one capital ratio in March 23 for the year prior, like weeks before they went bankrupt. I think we probably could have spotted Credit Suisse much earlier if they ran their banking infrastructure on Ethereum. And if they had come to us to make the ledger on June.
Yeah, I guess playing the other side and the value of the glossy reports, right? Where yes, anyone can go pull up a Dune dashboard and see the current state of Maker. But, I think the reason why kind of your annual report still gets, tens of thousands of downloads is like not everyone is as close to the weeds and the numbers as you are. It's like there's still value in having a subject matter expert, whether it's like an independent analyst, someone at the company or kind of a core service provider, really paint a picture behind the numbers and say like, hey, interest rates changed this much, which affected, the revenue, and like, these markets had this effect. Like that there is a lot of context that most people would miss by, simply looking at the numbers to kind of piece together that holistic view of a system.
Completely agree. No, completely agree. Like this context is super important. I'm just talking for myself. I'm a nerd. I love June. But for someone who's not following this on a day-to-day basis, like we are, there is no question that having extra context, understanding the macro environment and how the pieces fit together is like these reports are generally really well received. And I think this is the reason, right? We go into the context, we try to understand the macro environment, like Maker being a USD denominated stablecoin is exposed to many of the typical fiat considerations like interest rates, the geopolitical environment, what's happening in the economy, and so forth. And there's definitely a lot of value in being able to like put this all together and help explain why Maker has behaved in a certain way over the past year.
Yeah, and I guess, right, one of the other ways tokens kind of look like equity is in, right, their conference of governance rights over the system. And so, with that comes the ability to, in some cases, dictate like treasury spends or, determine who, like what service providers come in to work with the DAO. So I'm curious from your experience, like how have you viewed being one of these service providers that is going and requesting a scope of work and an amount of dollar spend and doing that versus like a traditional, almost like BD process or just like working with a centralized organization?
They're always, let's call them sales cycles, if you will. With protocols, it's a little bit different because like I mentioned earlier, I feel quite lucky to be in a position where we feel that we have a bit of a luxury in being able to pick our mandates because we try to select engagements that we believe in and where we think that we can make a real difference. And so in that respect, engaging with governance feels less like a sales cycle, and deal with governance ends up being just fine because we're just saying things that we believe, right? And if we can explain the value of what we do clearly enough and token holders agree, then we sign on to an engagement and we grow the protocol. One of the things that we don't do and that we stay away from are things like backdoor politics, cronyism, hiring princelings to secure mandates, all of this dirty stuff. Like we're not good at it. We're too small to be good at it. We're quite blunt. We're quite authentic. Like this is maybe a fault in some instances, but we don't mince words. Like what's the point? Life is too short to be someone else when you have to also be yourself. Mm-hmm. It's also something that each of the chefs have experienced in different forms in TradFi, and we've like grossed at it before. So we've been through that, and we're not going to do it again. Actually, one of the things that I love the most about this industry is how transparent and meritocratic it can be. Like when I started contributing to Maker and I started sending messages to Seb and to Mark and like pitching in, sending ideas, it didn't really matter who I was or where I came from or what my education was. We've interacted some of the smartest thinkers in the space that outstrip any TradFi rubber stamp of prestige, right? And I think that this, like the barriers to entry are like zero. You also see it in like the geographic distribution. Like I'm personally, my origins are Spanish and Serbian. And one of the things that I've appreciated the most actually is going to Belgrade and, going to Croatia, going back to the Balkans and seeing all of these little ecosystems of crypto companies really punching above their weight because all you need is a laptop and there's no the capital mobility is total. These are people that are building things like Tenderly or DeFi Saver or what have you. And like, these are like mainstays done by kids in a garage in Eastern Europe or in Africa or in Latin America. And I think, I would really like crypto to like keep these values, because I think it's like what makes it so special. One of the things that makes it so special. Mm-hmm. Interacting with governance, yeah. If we believe in the project, I think it's fine. The sales cycle for a traditional company is very different. The decision-making process is centralized. There's usually like a key person or a key group of people who need to make a decision. Even there, I think, the sales cycles can be quite long. Decision-making is very bureaucratic in many large companies. That's fine. Again, we try not to like reach out or accept inbounds from companies that we don't think have a lot of, or not even that we don't think have a lot of, we don't see how we can add value. It's like, okay, like this is great and you have all the people you need and we can't help you. Like, you're good to go. So we do try to focus on like those companies where we really think that this problem that you have, I really think that we can do the solution for this. And then the sales cycle is just longer, but it is centralized. Like, it's a company. So, one person has a budget and they say, I have this problem. I need to hire an external resource. We'll do it. Yes or no. And then, it happens that way.
How do you see that landscape evolving? Or, right, if you are just putting your forward-looking hat on, right, in 5 years, and in terms of the industry, its need for financial advisory and kind of Steakhouse's ambitions, like, do you guys see yourselves bringing this to scale? Do you guys see the nature of some of these engagements evolving? Would love to hear how you're thinking about that.
I think the first major way in which the nature of our business has shifted somewhat recently has been from what was originally a sort of advisory type relationship with Morpho, evolved into this risk curation role where they asked us to be, like, the team building Morpho asked us to be one of the launch partners for the vaults. That has since scaled way quicker than we expected. Mm-hmm. And, we're now like a leading curator. We're, on a risk adjusted rewards basis, on the basis that we don't, like, our thinking was something like the overwhelming majority of crypto leverage is around Bitcoin and ETH. And what we'll do is put liquidity against that and against tokenized treasuries, so that our vaults can be all market without taking an undue amount of risk. And this is like completely different from advisory relationships, but we found that it plugs in very nicely, actually, because we're developing expertise in now lending markets, which was a space that we didn't really touch beyond like Maker. It's also something that customers find super helpful as part of the portfolio of things that we can offer. Our vaults are now integrated into other stablecoins. Reservoir launched recently. Angle has been using Stake USDC for some time. We don't see this just as like integrate us and it'll be fun. It's like, this vault is actually what you're looking for when it comes to designing the stablecoin. Instead of asking for open source contributions to build a CDP engine, you can just plug in Stake USDC and focus on building a stablecoin, which is what really matters for a stablecoin. And so I think that this direction is definitely one of the more interesting ones, and one that we're spending a lot of time on to develop and mature in a sort of consequential way for the industry. Because I think this is Morpho in particular, like we really love the product. We really love the team. We use it a lot. It kind of reminds me of Maker in a lot of ways. Maker is, from a technical perspective, Maker is actually very straightforward. It's very simple. Like, there are a lot of smart contracts doing lots of different things. The way they're written is just extremely clear. You can almost read it like top to bottom and understand what's going on if you learn the jargon like Taiwanese. And Morpho is that, but smaller and simpler. Our belief is that this type of modular architecture where the risks are self-contained and well understood within a certain perimeter, once you have that ingredient, you can sort of build building blocks on top of it to build a stable coin, or you can build a repo product for a company, or you can do something else for someone else and have them all integrate with each other. I definitely think that this is how, like, putting my sort of TradFi hat on, it's like, oh, this is actually the benefit of using crypto infrastructure for finance, right? Like, this is actually the future for finance, because, TradFi already has repo markets. Like, they don't need crypto. They're quite cost efficient. and it works, and there's trillions of dollars settling every week or month. But Morpho, being small, I think can provide that cost efficiency and add additional benefits, like the network benefits of being able to interact with other protocols and share more of that capital and increase that capital efficiency. So these are the type of game-changing things that we're focused on, because like to start from like the beginning, like the reason that we're doing this is because we think that finance should be open and transparent, and we want to spend our time on things that we believe can get us there.
Yeah, I like how starting with the why and then using a lot of this knowledge you guys have compounded over time, being so close to the ground on the core DeFi primitives, and then as the space matures, being able to use that to think strategically about new innovative products, things that ultimately tie back to that why.
For sure. Like it's the reason, we have an organic grass-fed cap table. Like this is our time that we are investing in it. And we don't think that it's worth investing in unless we believe that we can make a change for the better in this particular thing that we're passionate about. And that's also kind of how we recruit chefs. When we look for chefs to help us and to start working with us, we look for that sort of similar obsessiveness about like, oh, this thing is broken, but crypto can fix it. And, we should do things that get us there one step at a time. Like we're not going to get there by bidding for every DAO to do like financial reports. It's a thing that is valuable, but it's just not what we're set out to do structurally. We believe in like small, focused, high touch engagements where we can really help. That help leads to open and transparent finance.
I love it. Cool. Well, I think that's probably a good place to wrap up. I know we covered a lot from monetary history, kind of getting the weeds on some of these accounting engagements, working through governance. So I guess one last question is where can people keep up with a lot of the grass-fed, medium rare work you guys are producing these days?
I think you can get the cringiest memes on our Twitter, and our June website is like a landing page of sorts, because you can access many of the dashboards that we make for all the different protocols and the queries and so forth. And finally, our website, where we try to put everything together, and you can browse some of the sort of research pieces and memos that we've written over the years.
Awesome. Sounds good. Well, thank you so much for coming on, Adrian.
Thank you so much for your time, and sorry for rambling in different directions. This is
no worries. Sorry, productive ramblings.